far as what gets turned in tomorrow. So I'm just going to do a quick recap of respiration, cellular respiration, because it pertains to your sourdough starter project that's going to be due in a few weeks here. So remember, cellular respiration is the opposite reaction of photosynthesis, where it takes glucose and oxygen and turns it into carbon dioxide and water as byproducts. And there's two routes that cellular respiration can take. There's aerobic respiration, which happens in the presence of oxygen, and that generates a total of 36 ATP, which is just the energy of the cell. ATP is a form of energy per every glucose molecule. And then there's anaerobic respiration, which is also known as fermentation, and this happens in the presence or in the lack of oxygen, where oxygen is absent. And this is far less efficient because it only creates 2 ATP per molecule of glucose, so way less energy. But it does create some byproducts like alcohol, which microorganisms like yeast use, and bacteria as well. They create the alcohol. Or then if you like some more vertebrate animals, cellular respiration undergoes without oxygen, they create lactic acid as a byproduct. So one of the really important organisms in this reaction is yeast. And yeast is a microorganism in the kingdom fungi. So think of mushrooms that are related to mushrooms. They're not plants, they're not bacteria, they are a fungus. And there are around 148,000 different species of fungi. Most notably is the species called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And this is the main species responsible for making beer, making wine, and bread making. So it's incredibly important as far as human civilizations go, because beer, wine, and bread are all staples of early civilizations, and we continue to use those methods with a little bit of modification, of course, in our everyday lives. So as far as yeast in brewing goes, yeast is important because yeast metabolizes the sugars from the different grains, the wheat, the barley, the mash in the beer, and creates alcohol and CO2 as a byproduct of fermentation with lack of oxygen. And so the earliest form of brewing beer was found around 7,000 years ago in modern day Iran. So this has been around for quite some time, but again, incredibly important for society in general. And then there's also yeast in bread making. And you guys saw this with your sourdough. This is kind of what you guys were mimicking. Yeast plays a role as a leavening agent, which is just making the flour rise. It makes it a little bit softer, a little bit easier to work with. And so the reason the bread rises is because without oxygen, of course, yeast undergoes fermentation and it creates CO2, and those CO2 bubbles get trapped in the flour and bread mixture, and then they rise. And bread is a huge staple of human diets. Evidence suggests that the first people to bake bread were ancient civilizations that surrounded Egypt around 9,100 years ago. And bread really became, a staple of human diet based on the production of wheat and barley and all that stuff, and the domestication of those grains. So bread is hugely important in human history and in the development of human civilization. So that's all I have for you guys today for lecture goes. I'm going to go through a few things to kind of round out the semester here. So tomorrow, April 9th at 5 p.m., you have your algae bees report. The final report is due then. In 2 weeks from now, you have your sourdough final report, as well as your iNaturalist report. And then week 15, you have your ecosphere final report. The iNaturalist report is a little different. It's not going to follow the same format as the algae beads, the sourdough, and the ecosphere report. It's going to be a little different. So this is how you should be turning in your iNaturalist final assignment overview. It's a little bit more on the simpler side. So all you got to do is write a one-page single-space recap of your experience using iNaturalist over the semester. In that page, you're going to include a screenshot of all the different observations you've taken. Of course, that won't count towards the one page of writing. You can do that on subsequent pages. But what I want you to go over in that one-page report is, what did you see? Did you go anywhere cool? Did you find out anything about your local biodiversity? Just give me a summary of what you did for the iNaturalist report. And then the main thing here is I really want you to identify all the observations. So unknown observations will not be accepted. I know some of you did have unknown observations when you turned them in. That's fine. But for this one, definitely try to identify them to species if you can. So if you just took a picture of a tree and it came back as unknown, try to really go back in and look at what that was. Maybe it was a redwood, maybe it was an oak tree, whatever that was. So do not turn in any unknown observations. And then as well, in addition to the one-page single-space recap, I want you to kind of include something like this. So iNaturalist, if you look at this link down here, does kind of a cool little summary of what you guys have done over the past 20 observations or so. And it kind of shows you how many different species you found, whether they were reptiles, birds, mammals, anything else. So give me some sort of visualization of what you guys did as far as like graph goes. Maybe what you want to plot, you know, where you found all this stuff from. Was it San Diego? Was it, you know, wherever you are? So give me some sort of visual representation of what you found and where you found it, in addition to the one-page summary. So this is the iNaturalist assignment, a little bit different than the final report that you'll be turning in for the algae beads, ecosphere, and the sourdough. So that's all I have for you guys today. Any questions for me? If not, you guys are free to go.
I actually do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So the sourdough project, I'm just kind of trying to figure out the weeks in my head. So this week is week 12. So the sourdough project is not due next week, but the week after, along with the iNaturalist report then.
Yeah, week 14.
Okay, and for the algae beads report, for the part about discussion, what are you wanting more like? Is it like more of an explanation on evidence, or what are you looking for there?
It's just sort of the, you know, the broader impacts of the results that you got. So what does that mean based on the science that you were given in the introduction? So how does your results relate to the science?
Okay, got it.
Mhm.
And for the results, I know you said if we wanted to include the tables and the graphs, then you put that on the page after. So for the results, if you're going to use like the lab manual things, should there just say something that says like see below, or should we put something else there?
You could just do see below. Yeah, you can do that. Just put
Okay.
like see below or see figure, you know, 2 or 5 or whatever it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure. What's up?
Is there any way that you'd be able to open up our exam today at like 11:30 instead of 12?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll open it up after this.
Okay, thank you so much.
I also had a question. So you're supposed to have a bibliography for the algae report, but what's supposed to be in the bibliography exactly?
Did the report include a bibliography section? I know other TAs include a bibliography. I don't think that I did.
Oh, okay.
Say bibliography on here. Oh yeah, at the very end there it says bibliography, but you don't need to include a bibliography.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I just think.
Okay, thank you. And I had one more question. Like in the discussion, is it okay if you talk about like one thing I talked about was like how the graph was like logistic growth, how it showed logistic growth.
Sure.
Is that okay? Or,
yeah.
Like just like that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I got a question here. For the algae bees report, do you add information and results about the brine shrimp? Yeah, you should add that in as well. Brine shrimp and the other algae experiment as well.